Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please have a seat. We're going to start the critical report from the World Fringe Congress. So this is an official report, so I am going to have to ask you to turn off any cell phones, pagers, anything that can beep or disturb us, because of course this is a very important report. So what is the World Fringe Congress? Well, last year, they had this thing called the inaugural World Fringe Congress. So this was the first time in the history of Fringe theater, which started in 1947, to invite all of the Fringe festivals in the world together under one roof. So they invited all of the festivals in the world that they could get their hands on, and a total of 41 festivals showed up. So that was 40 Fringe festivals and one Infringement Festival represented by myself. And these people came from 13 different countries around the world, and there was 60 delegates. So some of these Fringe festivals brought more than one people, or more than one person, I should say. So all these people came together in Edinburgh, Scotland. Now, when I first heard about this, that I was invited, I thought that there must have been a mistake of some sort, because of course, we were kicked out of the Fringe Festival in 2001 in Montreal, and that's why we founded the Infringement Festival in 2004. And so when I received this email, I thought, you know, are you sure you have the right person here? And they actually said, yes, we're positive we want you here. And I was pretty surprised, but they actually wrote in their letter, and I'll quote, it says, the Edinburgh Festival Fringe Society and World Festival Network are pleased to invite Donovan King, artistic facilitator of the Montreal Infringement Festival. The Congress organizers feel having the Canadian-born Infringement Festival present to share important views on Fringe theater around the world will contribute towards the high levels of discussions at the event. So I thought, wow, this is quite shocking, because of course in Canada we're treated somewhat differently at the Fringe, and I'll just show you a little video here to give you a taste of what we're used to when we go to the Fringe, because it's certainly not please come in, we're welcoming your opinion, but rather it's more like this.
So you're not still about the paperwork, have any shows here or anything, and we are allowed to bar anyone we want.
So you're telling me I'm not allowed into a public space on my birthday?
It's actually not public, it's public, but it's we filled out the paperwork, we are allowed to have our events here, you are not.
Well, it's just a birthday, this happens for years, it's not a big deal, we're not even going to say happy birthday.
No, that's fine, but unfortunately you can't come in.
Alright, so what's the order? We should.
Sorry?
Where's the order of the Fringes?
Here is the entire sidewalk, like at the sidewalk.
So this, for example, I couldn't do something here?
No, sir.
Would you mind actually pointing out the exact boundary just so I know?
The boundary would be the sidewalk. You're very well with the sidewalk here.
So can I come in here on the sidewalk?
If it's your own beer, go right ahead.
I asked you to buy me one.
No, sir. No, sir.
It's like it, what? You don't want us to support St. Ambroise?
No, we don't need your support.
Well, I guess we should get some shots to mark the boundaries so we know. You know something about the Charter of Human Rights? You heard of the Canadian Constitution?
Yes, sir.
I know what Section 2B stands for. Freedom of expression.
Express all you want.
Well, how can we? I'm not allowed to. Yes, you're saying I'm not allowed to go past.
You're not allowed to go inside there.
And you certainly have stopped me. I cannot
You can do what you like on the sidewalk.
Parce que c'est ma fête, je veux prendre quelques bières. On va pas me laisser rentrer parce que c'était du bonjour. Exactement. Exactement.
Désolé, mais c'est pas me filmer.
Anyone who knows that is not allowed in?
Désolé.
Charity is fun.
Excuse me, this is a fucking local resident. I'm a local resident, and I've been a volunteer for years at this event. So if you have a personal problem, you talk to me. What is that? I have no problem with anybody here.
What is this event that you've been a volunteer at?
The Fringe, hello. Today we have major problems at the Fringe Festival. They're denying artists the right to enter. We need a camera crew here. Immediately we need the chalk here ASAP.
We are allowed to refuse
I also work for other organizations too. I have to be part of infringement. So basically anyone remotely associated with this doesn't get it. Is that what you're saying? Watch out, they're not letting certain people in the festival. If you're associated with me, I'll let in. So.
Are you partying?
Yeah, you should go to don't say happy birthday to me. They won't let you in. Can we write words on the street?
on the sidewalk?
Yeah.
That's not our property, that's not our business. You can take that up with the councilors in the city. They will tell you if you can or you can't.
Please. I'm going to ask you to leave right now. Okay? All right. Thank you very much.
Trademark This was like 5 minutes ago. Water. You're already. Look at this. Censorship. He is. Very fucking is. He's fucking censoring us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is censorship right at the core. Enjoy. Spraying our chalk water. This is beautiful. You guys are destroying your own name. What happened to the Bill of Rights? Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. This is not public space. This space has been sold. This space has been sold. And that's what it said. I mean, they're trying to hide it because they're so ashamed.
Okay, so you get the idea. I'm not going to show the whole video because it sort of goes on for a while.
What year was that?
This was just about 2 years ago this happened. And the situation has improved a little bit, but it's still very, very problematic for certain artists in Montreal if they want to enter this public space during the Fringe Festival. It depends who they're associated with, whether they're actually allowed in or not. And of course, I'm one of the people who's never really allowed in, and I always trying to find ways through the back door to get in, and sometimes I do. So this is Edinburgh, Scotland, by the way. This is where the World Fringe Congress was held. So it's a beautiful city. It's very medieval. It's the capital of Scotland, which is of course part of Great Britain. It's a bunch of islands over there across the Atlantic Ocean. And basically what happens for the month of August in Edinburgh is they have the Fringe Festival, and so all sorts of people come from around the world and they begin doing different types of performances, theater, comedy, dance, music, all sorts of different stuff. They set up tents like this one here in one of the parks. And theaters start popping up all over the place. Now a little bit of history of the Fringe Festival. Now this started, as I said, in 1947, and it started after World War II on the heels of the war. And the idea of the government at the time was to try to sort of, try to remoralize these people who'd been demoralized during the war. They'd been bombed and all sorts of horrible things. And so they thought bread and circuses is the way to go. We're going to give them a festival. And so they gave them the Edinburgh International Festival. And only professional acts were invited. So they were telling the local population, oh yeah, it's going to be great. We're going to have acts from London, from New York City. You're going to get to sit here and watch it. It's going to be great. But the Scottish artists weren't really satisfied with just being spectators. The Scots have a bit of a reputation for activism themselves. And so they said that they wanted to play in the festival, but they were told it was for professionals only, and that, again, they could be the audience. So basically, after being told no, that they could not perform in the Edinburgh International Festival, these artists made a threat. They threatened that if they could not play in this official festival, they would still play regardless, but on the fringe of this official festival. And sure enough, they made good on their threat because they were not allowed to play at that original festival. And the following year, journalist Robert Kemp wrote, "Around the fringe of official festival drama, there seems to be more private enterprise than before. I'm afraid some of us are not going to be going home during the evenings." So you could see that already it was starting to become more interesting on the fringes of this festival than the original festival, which was intended to be the main event. In fact, it continued growing the fringe, and you know, not only did it become much, much bigger than the original festival in Edinburgh, but it began multiplying around the world in many different countries, especially Canada actually. We have about 15 of them there today, but it really started taking off there, and it's actually taking off right now in the United States. New fringes are appearing every week in this country right now. Now the problem was that after they began multiplying, many of the festivals began suffering from what I call corporate interference. And this results in a schism between administration and artists. And basically what happens is the administrators start getting paid money, and the artists start paying money for these administrators. And then the administrators start making all sorts of corporate decisions, such as corporate sponsorships, pay-to-play fees, ticket surcharges, etc., etc. And the next thing you know, you have these artists who are being exploited, and you have these administrators who are having a pretty good time because they're salaried and they have all sorts of other benefits. Now, in addition, in 1998, the word fringe was actually trademarked in Canada on Bay Street, which is their equivalent of Wall Street, in Toronto, by the CAF, or the Canadian Association of Fringe Festivals. Now, in 1998, the CAF trademarked the word fringe, allegedly to, and this is on their website, to preserve fringe ideals and principles. Okay, so if you think, well, what does that mean exactly? Yeah, if you think of the original fringe, to me that would mean, well, it's activist, it's inclusive, and it's free. However, you know, we can see that with the way they've done this, it didn't exactly match those original principles. It seems they've redefined them a little bit, because if you check the Canadian Intellectual Property Office, the CAF actually trademarked the word fringe for financial reasons, including the selling of fringe-related wares and services. And these include t-shirts, caps, brochures, programs, posters, and mugs, bookmarks, calendars, decals, collectible cards, greeting cards, notepads, diaries, pens, glasses, mugs, tumblers, memo pads, keychains, bumper stickers, adult and children's clothing, namely shirts, pants, woven shirts, polo shirts, fleece shirts, sweaters, tank tops, sweatpants, shorts, scarves, hats, caps, and sun visors, umbrellas, handheld fans, and cushions. And of course, the services include presentation, the advertisement, and the promotion of theater productions. So this was not exactly the original idea of the fringe, I don't think. Now also, some of the fringe festivals have began what's called cross-branding. And this is a strategy where they will sort of sister up with a corporation for lots of money, of course, and they will rename their festival after the corporation. And in this case, we had a fringe festival called the Saskatoon Fringe Festival. This is a city in Saskatchewan, Canada, a very small city. And it is now called the Potash Corp Fringe Festival. So you don't even know where it is. It does, like, the word Saskatoon does not appear here at all. And what's the Potash Corp? Well, that's actually a $40 billion corporation that extracts natural resources to make fertilizer. The industrial process causes untold environmental destruction, and the Potash Corp has been criticized for damaging ecosystems and importing minerals from illegally occupied territories such as the Western Sahara. So basically, now that it's called the Potash Corporation, the artists are pretty much discouraged from criticizing, obviously, the Potash Corporation itself, or by extension, any type of environmental criticism would be frowned upon at this type of festival because the sponsor won't like it. So here we're starting to get into the areas of censorship. This is exactly how we got kicked out of the Montreal Fringe Festival, by the way, which is called the St. Ambroise Fringe Festival named after a beer company, we upset a different corporate sponsor, which was the newspaper in town, and they said kick them out or we're going to pull all coverage of the festival and the $15,000 sponsorship. So you can see once corporations start taking charge of these festivals, we can really see that the artist is the one who suffers the most in the end, and of course by extension the spectators and the community. So welcome to Edinburgh. So this is me showing up. Of course it's a beautiful rainy city, it's often wet, so hence the umbrella. So the first thing I did when I arrived in Edinburgh, I went to the airport sort of information booth and I said, can I have some information about the Fringe? And so they said, yes, of course. So they gave me a big glossy booklet, and then I said, oh, do you have one for the Edinburgh International Festival also? They said, yes, of course. So they gave me another big glossy booklet, and I looked at them and I'm like, wow, these look like they're almost the same thing. So I opened them up to the sponsors page, and I thought, you know, what's the difference between the sponsors between these two events? And so you can see I have just a photo of the different sponsor pages. One's the Fringe, and one's the Edinburgh International Festival. So my first question is, can you even guess which is which? You say this is the International, and this is the Fringe? Why would you say that?
I'm just saying oil.
Okay, because you're seeing Shell Oil. Okay, you would actually be correct. The Fringe has not gone that far yet into Shell Oil, but the International one, they never had problems with corporate sponsors from day one. That's one of the reasons they were there. Yes, so that's correct. This is the International one, and this is the Fringe. Now, my next question is, do you see any crossover? Do they have any of the same sponsors, or are they all totally different?
I see that circle, I don't know what that is.
Okay, which one? This one here?
No,
O2.
Here?
The black one.
Here, O2?
That looks similar. But
Oh, it's not the same.
To this?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
That one doesn't have a 2.
yeah, I guess the one up a bit, but
That looks like
it's a little
BP.
different too.
Is that BP up there?
Okay, yeah, we got more oil. It's not just Shell, it's also BP. So they got heavy oil. Here you got right-wing media. So you've got, I don't know if you can see it very well here on this image, but it's actually right up at the top there. And that's, of course, the shared sponsors, Virgin Money. Now, if you know Richard Branson, he's a famous British billionaire, I guess. He has a lot of corporations. And he also likes trying to fly around the world in balloons and things like that. So he decided to, it was first Virgin Music. He sold records and CDs, and then he went into banking. And so Virgin Money, you know, is this an ethical corporation? Is this something that should really be associated with a
Would you
Fringe?
bring this corporation home to your parents?
Exactly. Well, it turns out that Richard Branson, you know, he started using Virgin Money to hike credit card interest rates by 50% for some of his customers. And, you know, if you do some research, you can see this is about as sleazy as it gets for a financial institution. I mean, imagine your bank overnight suddenly jacking up your interest rate to 50% on your credit card when normally it's maybe 18%. And so this is the type of thing that Richard Branson is up to, and many of the other corporate sponsors at the Edinburgh Fringe, very unethical, you know, the Daily Mail, right-wing papers, things like Ducar's Beer, which is buying out all the pubs in Edinburgh, all these historical pubs so they can serve their beer, and things like that. Some of the quotations I encountered in the newspapers there. This one was from The Guardian. This is the sort of the big left-wing newspaper in the UK. It said, "The Fringe has lost its edge. It has become an angrily disputed territory so threatened by commercialism, some believe that the future of the entire annual event is in danger." This was one of the artists who's played on the Fringe for many, many years. The pay-to-play system means that the rich kids always win. No matter how funny a working class kid is, if they can't ask mom and dad to give them $5 grand, they're not going to be able to come up here to perform. Tommy Shepard. He's been playing there for a long time. So the World Fringe Congress, this was the thing that I was invited to. It was held here in this building, which is an old veterinary college. So that was sort of interesting. It was 5 days long. Again, all of the Fringe festivals were invited. About 45 attended. And it involved, you know, it was pretty busy. It involved a keynote speech It involved different workshops, breakout sessions, excursions. We got to meet people like the Lord Mayor. We had discussions, we had luxury and VIP access to members-only clubs, things like this. So as delegates, we got to experience the posh and luxurious demi-monde of the Fringe administrators. And being an artist, I was kind of shocked to see the types of perks that come with this job. So for Fringe administrators, what we have for some of the perks are a salary. Sometimes the salary is pretty good from what I understand for the higher ups. They do have VIP access to any of the artists that they want, and of course this does include famous international artists as well at the Fringe nowadays. They have free travel, so they can travel to other Fringe festivals around the world. They have free lodgings. They also have corporate treatment in many cases with all those perks. There's a status that comes with it. And of course power, the power to be a cultural gatekeeper, the power to decide who's in this festival and who isn't. And of course any other benefits that might come along with that. And just as an example, this was one of the many posh parties we were invited to. This is a rooftop party. And of course all of these events had catered gourmet food and free alcohol, and what made this one even more spectacular was the fireworks that began exploding around us as we enjoyed our flutes of champagne and our canapes on the rooftop with the administration. So one of the workshops I wanted to talk about, because there were quite a few, good afternoon, this was a workshop called It Is All About the Money, Sponsorship and Investment for Your Fringe. And so this was by a man named Barclay Price. And when I heard his name, I thought, oh my God, his name sounds like a bank. You have the Barclay Bank, Price Waterhouse, just put that together and you've got the perfect, ultimate administrator for this type of stuff. So he was running an organization called Creative Business Scotland. Somehow the word business disappeared in his logo. And his workshop was about how to attract major sponsors and how to keep them, how to get funding when you don't make the work, how to calculate your financial value, and fundraising and other sources of income, such as business, local authorities, arts funding bodies, and crowdfunding. Okay, so if you think back to this original Fringe, these people, hey, we're going to play on the fringes if you don't let us in, to this, how to attract a major sponsor. Now, I should mention that at the World Fringe Congress, when they invited me, I did ask them about 100 questions to ask things like, well, can I give a workshop? Will I be allowed to hold a discussion? Will I be allowed to ask questions? Things like this. And while they didn't really want me having any major role, I was at least allowed to ask questions, which is very different than in Montreal, where I'm not even allowed to cross the border. So I decided to ask Barclay a question. I thought I was going to put him on the spot in front of all of these crowds of administrators, and these administrators were really excited about this workshop. They were all in attendance when they heard about the money. And so I asked Barclay, I said, Barclay, given this cross-branding of things like the Potash Corp Fringe, which I personally feel damages, the Fringe's integrity, my question to you is, if you think it's acceptable to do this type of cross-branding, which corporation do you think would be the best for the Edinburgh Fringe? And I heard this sort of gasp in the room from the administrators, as though they were shocked at this idea of renaming the granddaddy of the Fringes after a corporation, but Barclay Price didn't bat an eyelash. He said, well, the Pepsi Fringe would be a good match. So I kid you not. I mean, don't be surprised if next year it's the Pepsi Fringe and not the Edinburgh Fringe. So I knew that we were in trouble at this point. So yes, the Pepsi Fringe, I don't know. It just doesn't sound right to me for some reason. It just doesn't roll off the tongue like the Potash Corp.
Nestle Fringe would be better.
Yeah, now here we had something called a breakout session. Now this was as close as I could get to expressing my point of view in an official setting. And how this works is you write down what you want to talk about and you put it up on a bulletin board. And then people decide to go to the group what they want to talk about. So here's mine. And it says here, it says corporate manipulation at the Fringe TM, question mark. Where should we draw the line? Okay, so I'm thinking, where should we draw the line? Should we let Walmart or Pepsi sponsor it? You know, should we cap it at maybe $10,000 that the artist has to pay to play? I mean, where do you draw the line? But only 2 people showed up to my breakout session. Most of the other administrators were the ones where they're talking about how to get money. So this is what it costs to play at the Edinburgh Fringe nowadays. If you want to play there, you have to give them £400. Now this is British money, and I did a calculation yesterday on a currency converter, and this equals, as of yesterday, $607 and 36 cents. Now I don't know about here in Canada, this is enough to pay for your rent easily, and then some, for a month, okay? Now, I'm assuming this is probably a lot of money down here also, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, what do you get for this fee? Well, you get your show listed in the official Fringe program. That's that piece of sort of phone book-like document they gave me at the airport. And that's it. That's all you get. So, you know, hundreds of shows listed, yours is one of them in this book. What you don't get for this fee is a venue. So obviously you're going to have to pay hundreds of pounds more per week now for the venue. You don't get a technician if you need one. So now you're going to have to pay probably about £50 a day for a technician for your show, for like an hour or 2-hour show. You don't get a place to stay. So you need to get a hotel, or if you're lucky, you might be able to get something cheap for like £20 a day by packing all of your artists into one tiny apartment. Nor do you get any type of taxes waived for doing theatre in Edinburgh. There's even fees you have to pay for permits to do theatre in that city. And you don't get any additional support at all. Okay, so for £400, you get about 10 words on a piece of paper in a book with hundreds of pages. So, the results. So what has happened to the Fringe because of all this? Well, now in Edinburgh, the Fringe theatre is done mostly by people with money because other people can't afford it. So this excludes most artists, it certainly excludes political activists, and it certainly excludes the disadvantaged as well. Now, just to give you an example, we have a lot of one-person shows that draw on popular culture, things like a one-man Star Wars. You have things like private schools, including from the United States. I saw many, many groups of children going to Edinburgh to do Broadway musicals that they'd just done in their private school, because of course their parents can afford to pay for them to go to Edinburgh. So you've also got fluff from wealthy theatre hobbyists, like this lady. She had a show called The Hitchhiker. And the reason I went was her original show was about Occupy, and I said, oh my god, this is great, there's something about Occupy at the Fringe. And I went there and she explained, oh, I don't have my PowerPoint and blah blah blah, but it's okay, I have another show I'm going to give you about hitchhiking. And this show was like, whoa, it was painful, very painful, because it started very late. It went on and on and on, and then she went over her time, and the next person who was trying to do a show was actually someone who was disadvantaged. I think he might have had multiple sclerosis or something, and he was begging her to like let him start his show, and she was being rude to him. She's like, sit down, watch my show. And I'm like, what is going on here? This is like totally disrespectful, what's happening? And so this is the type of stuff we're seeing at the Fringe. You know, here's a selection of the one-man shows. I mean, you could choose a one-man Star Wars trilogy. I mean, not just the Star Wars, you get the whole trilogy from this man. You've got the one-man Lord of the Rings. You know, here you've got other one-man shows. This is a one-man Hamlet, you know, all of these types of things. So this is the only way you can make money, is if you're a professional actor with a one-man show who's doing a rip-off on popular culture. This is about the only way you can make cash at the Fringe. So of course, like here, where we have an infringement, in Edinburgh, a free Fringe has appeared, because you know, a lot of these artists are just as angry as we are, and so they made a free Fringe. And this one's run by a man named Peter Buckley Hall. And it's different from the infringement in that Peter curates the artist himself. So he decides if you're good enough or not. He might say, well, you know, sorry, you're just not good enough for this venue. Okay, so it's not really the same concept as the original Fringe, which means everyone can play. It's totally inclusive, but at least it's better than having to pay £400 to get into the Fringe. Now this is an example of something at the Free Fringe. Now her name's Catherine Brogan, and I had the pleasure of witnessing her performance in Edinburgh after the Hitchhiker show. And this was brilliant. This girl is from Occupy. She's Irish, she's playing her Bowron there. And she gave us some awesome stories from Occupy. She gave us some hot poetry. And you know, she's totally activist, she's a squatter, you know, and she's heavily involved in the community. And she played for free. So that's the difference that I saw, at least, between Fringe, as it is now, or corporate Fringe, and Free Fringe, which is very similar to Infringement, of course. It's a lot more critical, it's a lot more activist, it's a lot more energetic and exciting, in fact. Now, the last thing is that the Fringe brand has sustained serious damage over the years because of all of this corporate interference, which waters down any type of potency it may have had and dulling its edge. So you could say nowadays the Fringe is really more of a marketing opportunity for corporations than it is a festival for artists, which is, of course, what it was intended to be in the first place. And it's not just the Fringe where we see this happening, by the way. If you follow the news, you'll see that Disney just tried to trademark the Day of the Dead. This is a Mexican holiday, and they wanted to trademark this. And of course, luckily, there was enough outrage online that they backed off. And so that's the type of thing that needs to happen when the corporations come in to try to trademark this stuff. Another one I heard about, they're trying to trademark the Tooth Fairy now. And the idea is that, you know, when your kid loses their teeth, no longer is it this great thing from their imagination. Now they have someone on television to associate with it. Now they can buy the doll, blah, 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 blah. And it's just this corporate interference ruining authentic culture. It's all over the place. Here's some corporate spam at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. You can see, for example, all over the streets they're saying the Fringe Virgin Money, the bank that performs on the high street. You know, this is the Fringe. You know, it's talking about a bank and how well it performs on Main Street. You've even got the BBC. This is like the corporate government media, and you know, they have their own special tent there. And this one, just to show you, is actually the Edinburgh International Festival. I found that hidden there. They've actually got a big corporate building right there as well. So it's all very similar how these things are looking nowadays. So what do you do when, you know, your culture's taken over by corporations? Well, for us, instead of the one-man Star Wars, the infringement strikes back. Just to give you an example of our logo, when we made the infringement, this was the corporate logo in Montreal for the Fringe. Okay, so the St. Ambroise logo was right up there. That's that beer company. And so when we created the infringement, we simply took their logo and photoshopped it. So we added, there's I-N and then M-E-N-T, and then we got rid of the corporate logo, and then we removed the trademark, and bingo, you know, so now we're in business. So yes, the infringement was our response to this, and it still is, of course. So at the World Fringe Fair, this is pretty much one of the best things I was able to do. They actually gave me a table, which was really nice. Everyone got a table. And so I was able to put a lot of infringement propaganda or information on the table, including the Buffalo program and articles and things like this. And you can see the fair up there. And also I had my Occupy mask on, and even lots of little red squares. And if you know much about Montreal, we were very close to having a revolution because the government tried to double the students' tuition, and they shut down the whole city. The government passed a law against them, and then the whole society shut down. People started banging on pots and pans instead of going to work and wearing these red squares. So it was a real type of cultural resistance. So, you know, this is how I was doing. I was handing out information. I was trying to challenge this official discourse. Now, one of the documents I was giving them was telling them, you know, what the infringement promises. And this is very different from the Fringe, because the Fringe, all of these things were written in opposition to a problem at the Fringe. Okay, so the first thing is no unethical sponsors. Things like Virgin Money, for example. No conflict of interest sponsors, for example, like a newspaper who might be reporting on you and paying money at the same time. No visual pollution or corporate spam, like we saw with that Virgin Money spam all over the street. No pay-to-play fees. None of this £400 for your name in the program. No box office service charges. They insist on running your box office so they can actually take a cut off of each ticket that's sold. No trademarking. The word fringe, again, it's been trademarked in Canada. I heard that it was also trademarked in the United Kingdom recently. No legal threats for using the word fringe. In Canada, they will actually threaten you legally if you use this word without their permission. There were some students in Halifax who tried to do some fringe theater on the campus, and they received a legal letter telling them to cease and desist, or they would be sued because they didn't have permission to use this word, and so they started an infringement. Great. No censorship. Obviously, there's a lot of censorship that comes into play when there's all of these corporate, this type of corporate manipulation. You cannot kick artists out of the infringement. Again, they're starting to do this more at the Fringe. We got kicked out, but it's happening more and more. Some of the administrators I met told me that they were starting to kick out some artists for different reasons. No favoritism, no banning of political artists, as we saw on the Fringe border there. No security guards, no bag searches. At the Fringe, they actually search through your bag now in Montreal. There's no hierarchy. Yeah?
I'm sorry, but last year at my airport musical, we searched people, but it was part of the play. Is that okay?
So no hierarchy, there's no like board of directors, there's no CEO, there's nothing like that, there's no corporate structure, there's no naming rights, there's no cross-branding. This is not going to be renamed the Buffalo Bills infringement one day or something like that. And there's no corporate manipulation, there's no interference allowed at all with the infringement. And even though like it might seem kind of common sense, it's crazy to think that this doesn't really exist in the world very much at all. It's actually a big political effort to try to make something like this happen. And so here's Peter Buckley Hall, for example. He came to my table, which was nice, to say hi. And another thing why I have Pussy Riot up here is because you would think that somewhere like the Fringe would be, you know, hosting events to support artists like the Pussy Riot who are very fringe and on the edge. And you know, one woman tried to get fringe artists to support this, and none of them cared. They were totally uninterested in this, and they were more concerned about making their ticket sales that evening. And so I was like, that sucks. And so this is me leaving. This is after like being awake all night. I slept about 2 or 3 hours a night at this Congress. Obviously, there's a lot of things to do, and trying to blog and everything. I have a big 5-part written report. But I think what I accomplished is that I raised awareness amongst the other delegates there that there is an issue, if they weren't aware of it at least. I challenged the official discourse, which is this is great and we should just keep doing this as it is and make it bigger and bigger. I asked critical questions. For example, the Adelaide Fringe in Australia is deeply embedded with the media, and so I was asking questions, you know, about conflict of interest, things like that. I also demanded action. I demanded that they do something about this. I said, this Congress isn't good enough if you just accept everyone for what they are and you don't challenge anyone. I mean, they were saying, oh, the Fringe means whatever to anyone, and that's great. And I'm like, yeah, but then it's not the Fringe. It could be anything. So I was demanding action, and you know, I questioned the direction that they're moving in. And I tried to set the stage for 2014 when they will have the second World Fringe Congress in Edinburgh. And so hopefully this time I will be allowed to give some type of workshop, and we will be bringing other infringers too, not just me. So start saving some money if you want to come. So this was what I tried to do. Now, the infringement today, just to give you an idea of what it's like, we have 4 permanent festivals. We have Montreal, which was the first in 2004, Buffalo, 2005, Brooklyn, 2009, that one started, and then Hamilton, Ontario in 2010. Now the festivals have also been held in places as far afield as Ottawa, Toronto, Manhattan, Regina, and even Bordeaux, France. And they might start one in Ipswich in the UK, and there's talk of starting one in Atlantic City as well. So you could say that it, like the Fringe, is also spreading, albeit maybe a bit slower. So I guess you could say that the infringement is both a global movement, because it is spreading around, and it's also an art form. And the art form is very avant-garde, it's very critical, it's very inclusive, and so I think this slogan that they created in Buffalo a couple of years ago, "Infringe every day," really to me summarizes what it's all about. It's not just a festival that happens once a year, it's actually something you can do all the time. Cultural resistance, you can do that when you're at your bank, you can do that when you're shopping, you can do that when you're walking down the street. There's all sorts of things you can do as cultural resistance.
What newspaper is that?
That's the Buffalo
Oh,
News.
okay.
Last year, I think.
Yeah, in Montreal, like we're not even in some of the newspapers. We're censored from certain papers. So it's funny to come here where it's like, wow, this is great. Now I showed you the video. Okay, now I wanted to tell you a little bit about what happened this summer in Montreal. So as I said, I do try to get into the Fringe sometimes and try to find ways through their border. And usually that means I'm invited by another organization who's having an event there, and this is how I get in. And then I end up giving a speech on their stage and they get all upset. And so this is what we did this year. We went to their, they had this sort of media event. We even performed a scene there criticizing their kids' Fringe in the scene. Because this year they decided, let's have a kids' Fringe at the St. Ambroise Fringe. And so this is like literally from their website, okay? So we have, what it is. It's a kids' Fringe. It's theater, dance, visual arts. It's bilingual. It's in both languages. It's for children 0 to 12 years old. This child would be very welcome at the kids' Fringe, in fact. It lasts a few hours. We should join them, and here's the website. Okay, so, I don't know, what's wrong with this picture? Can anyone sort of take a stab at what might be wrong with this?
Well, those kids didn't design that thing that they're chalking in.
Okay, well, that's not a big problem to me if the kids can draw what they want. The problem lies in what's right up there. They made it look very small. This is the St. Ambroise Fringe. St. Ambroise is a beer company, okay? This is a beer tent. And, basically, advertising to children is illegal in Quebec. Advertising anything is illegal to children because Quebec tries to protect children. But it's especially illegal to advertise dangerous products like tobacco, alcohol, fast food, prescription drugs, and these types of things to children. This is very illegal.
Maybe they have a baby beer brand or something?
So of course, the minute that you bring your children into this beer tent, hey, would you like some apple juice? With all of the, these different types of beer under there. I think it's frozen or something here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is, again, more, this is the St. Ambroise. That was that logo we spray painted out. So, you've got all of these different bottles of booze and beer taps and everything like that all over the place. This is a wine company, so they've got these big inflatable balloon-like things, and we all know how much children love balloons. So, this is like, here's your gateway to alcoholism, potentially. So here we have the children drawing with the chalk, surrounded by all of this alcohol advertising. And even when they blew bubbles, they would pour the bubbles into a St. Ambroise cup for the kids to blow them. And, so here we have this example. This is crazy. You've got this gigantic wine balloon thing here. And here's a child who's trying to draw, and this lady who has a child clutched to her chest was one of the Fringe employees. And she came up to us and she started warning us, don't film the children, don't cause any problems and things like this, because we've gone into the kids' fringe and they couldn't stop us because it's a kids' fringe. They're not going to have a security guard, frisking children, and they don't want a scene either. So this is how we got in here. Now, of course, we had the infringement to the rescue. Now, if you know this young lady, she's a native Buffalonian, Hannah Hampton. She has a show called Urbex. She's an urban photographer, so she has all these cool Rust Belt type of buildings in her work. And she came up to the Montreal Infringement Festival, and so she joined in the fun. She took one of the casseroles that people have been banging on, put that on her head, and then called for the boycott. This young lady took the chalk that the children were using to write "beer and kids don't mix" on the ground. And of course the Fringe staff didn't like that. The woman demanded that she erase that, and she said it's not fair to write offensive to the parents. It's illegal to bring your children here. So this was some nice infringing at the St. Ambroise Fringe. And of course calling for this boycott, and I'm pretty sure next year it's not going to be called the St. Ambroise Fringe anymore, because we're really turning the screws on them. They really made a big mistake here. So in conclusion, the World Fringe Congress #2 will take place next summer in the month of August. There's currently about 80 fringe festivals. They're spreading very fast right now, and unfortunately most of them are appearing with corporate standards. They just opened one in Rochester next door to you guys. This was opened by someone we call Dr. Fringe. It's the only person in the world with a PhD in fringe theater. Zella Batchender, her name is. And she's very clever. She's very clever. She found a way to bust the Fringe trademark in New York City so she could open a Fringe in Rochester. And then her first decision was to rename that the Niagara Bank Fringe. So anyways, this whole World Fringe Congress, even though they did let me speak a little bit, I think it's a bit of a ruse, to be honest, to create this more corporate formula that they want to export around the world and to take the best practices from that. That's sort of the sense I got from it, at least. And so I see now they're popping up everywhere. I'm like, oh, what a surprise. So the best way, I think, at least, to prevent the corporate takeover of the fringes, because if we let them just make thousands of corporate fringes, it's going to be that much harder to stop them in the future. So we need to think critically, obviously, and we need to encourage others to do that, including the artists. If an artist says, oh, okay, I'm paying $1,000 to play here, maybe you need to have a conversation with them. You need to challenge all corporate interference in the arts and culture, whether it's Disney trying to get the Day of the Dead, or someone tried to trademark the Fringe, Of course, you can participate in the infringement festivals as artists, spectators, supporters. You can also establish new infringement festivals if you like. We have a how-to guide online if you want to spread the word, or if you know people in other cities, or if you plan to go to another city. And of course, you can also infringe every day, as they recommend here in Buffalo. So I'm going to take questions and answers if anyone has them. Also, here's my email if anyone wants to reach me in the future. And lastly, you can come play in Car Stories too if you want tomorrow. This is the show that got kicked out of the Fringe Festival in Montreal and sparked the creation of the infringement. And this is a show on cars. The actors are in the front seat, the audience in the back seat. And if you want to play, just come on down tomorrow. We're having a meeting at 2 p.m. at Nietzsche's. The show starts at 4, and we're playing Saturday and Sunday from 4 to 8 p.m. for 3 spectators at a time. You can bring cars, stories, and people if you like. And just before the questions, if there are any, I just want to show you their official version of the World Fringe Congress. Because, we got to show this too. And this is sort of like almost, I think it's a bit like, whoa! Yeah, I think it sounds a bit like an infomercial, but, So this is what they created. So it has a very feel-good vibe. There's very little critical analysis here. So maybe this will just give you a taste of what I experienced there in Edinburgh.
America, Poland, Dublin, Ireland, China.
I'm very interested to hear about everyone else's festivals, since Fringes around the world do tend to be so similar but also so different at the same time.
Basically the same nuts all over the world that are doing this because they believe in something.
I want to talk about the philosophy of the Fringe. That's what we want people.
I think what an amazing opportunity to be in the space with around about 40 other festivals.
Fringe Association.
These would be Disney Fringe, Orlando.
Southeastern United States together. So that was very exciting.
I got some incredible ideas from India just as far as outreach goes to facilitate families creating theater with professional artists. Awesome idea.
Starting a film festival or being heavily involved in one is an extraordinary act. It's like extreme sports. We're like extreme culture. I feel incredibly inspired to go back out and fight again. Thanks to everything that all of you have given me. So, and I'm now quite comfortable living in a world of cultural chaos.
Because everybody's learned something from each other, it means that this section is now stronger than it was 3 days ago. And I think that's something that you're taking back to every corner of the world that's here. And together we will create a really strong, brilliant, known brand, which is Fringe.
Okay, so there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. So I am now taking questions if there are any. Yes.
So how does the funding work for the Infringement Festival? I know the artists don't pay fees, but how are the costs of the venues and all the rest?
Most of the venues are donated, as far as I understand. In Montreal, they're all donated, and the owners of the venues understand that, and usually they recoup their costs by selling beer or coffee or whatever they do, or by generating awareness about their venue or things like that. But there's no money being exchanged for things like venues, or if there is, I haven't heard of it. It's probably pretty rare.
But we have fundraisers throughout the year, and that's pretty much it. Most of the venues are donated, but sometimes we have to pay. It depends on the day, and if we have, it's usually for sound guy, depending on which venue it is, it's usually music, but there's not many, like a couple. So we have a few shows, like they're usually niches on the last weekend that are like $5 at the door, and that's pretty much it.
Also, crowdfunding, right? You do the Kickstarter.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. We do a Kickstarter too, after we've already had all our fundraisers. So I guess it's like, I'd say about May, we usually start the Kickstarter, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, in Montreal we have one small business that makes a local micro brew, and they give us a few kegs of beer, and we sell that, and that's enough to run the entire festival for less than $1,000.
You know, like here, the Art Voice prints the schedule in there. I mean, I think it's like you can't deny that there's a cost to doing things, but it's sort of a matter of like keeping it sort of more organic.
Yeah, keeping it very inexpensive, not charging people specifically, but rather, if there needs to, if money's needed, it needs to be collected, through a fundraiser or through an ethical sponsor or something like that. Because yeah, of course, there's always going to be some expenses in a festival. But our philosophy is if you don't have the money, don't spend it. And this is why we don't have a Manhattan infringement, is they tried to do one, but they ended up spending all this money that they didn't have. And then they said, well, we lost all this money, so we don't want to do it again. And I was like, yeah, then you didn't understand how this was meant to work, So, it's tricky. I mean, for sure, you ask any of the volunteers here, you ask any of us in Montreal, it's hard work throughout the year, but the rewards are amazing. to create a community where you're welcomed and you can do whatever you want without any interference, that's gold, and that's worth every hour that goes into it. Yes?
What first brought the Montreal car stories to Buffalo?
Well, basically we met a man named Kurt Schneiderman in Toronto, and that was the year we created the Infringement Festival. So we created it in Montreal. That year the government had ironically given us $20,000 to do theater, to do car stories specifically. So there must have been a sympathetic year when they heard we got kicked out of the Fringe. And so we had all this money, and so we decided, okay, we're going to go on the road, we're going to pay actors, we're going to get gas, cars, whatever. And so we thought we're going to make infringement festivals too. So we made one in Ottawa, we made one in Toronto, just little ones, just 5 or 10 acts. And we met a man named Kurt Schneiderman in Toronto of the Subversive Theater, and he was upset because he paid all this money to be in the Fringe. He had a show that was activist, it was Bertolt Brecht or something like that, and no one was going to the show because of course at the Fringe they were all paying for the one-man Star Wars and things like that. And so he had all these upset actors who'd come all the way from Buffalo playing to empty houses who had just spent a ton of money, and so they were pretty unhappy. And so we said, oh, that's cool that you're activists, we're going to come see your show for sure. And so we saw their show, they saw our show, we were having a conversation, and Kurt said, well, we always wanted a Fringe in Buffalo, but we can't afford it. They want a $10,000 fee just to use the trademark, and we don't have that kind of money in Buffalo. And I said, well, why don't you guys start an infringement festival? I said, well, how much is that? It's free. So the next year, there was one here. We drove down with car stories, and we've been coming back ever since. We might have missed 1 or 2 years in the history of it, but that's why we came down with car stories, because we were invited. And boy, were we amazed to see this infringement take off. It's big now. It's like our infringement has maybe 50 or 60 acts. Here, there's almost 1,000, I think. So it's a real pleasure to come here every year. Did you have a question?
Yeah, what got you kicked out of the Montreal Fringe?
Well, basically, this theater critic came to see our show, and she was from the newspaper that was also the corporate sponsor of the festival. So our box office in Car Stories is theatrical. So you're not going to meet me. You're going to meet me playing a character. So and we have this system with the Optative glasses. So I'll probably have these glasses on, and I'll be something like, oh, you're here for Car Stories. All right. You need some tickets? Okay, let's go. Let's discuss this over here. Type of thing. Okay, so it's very theatrical, right? Yeah. So she got to the box office, and she didn't really realize this. And, she had some document, I'm the theater critic, I get a free ticket type of thing. We're the sponsor of this event, and, it's a free pass. And I told them, no, there is no free pass here. We've had to pay a ton of money to get in here. There's only 3 people coming to see the show. They're taking a ticket charge also. They're insisting on running the box office. So, we can't be letting these people in for free. Just forget it, They're the sponsor. They're not getting it for free. And so she got all angry at this box office girl and crumpled up this paper that she had and threw it at the girl, right? And the ironic thing was she was a Fringe Festival volunteer because, the Fringe makes their volunteers run our box offices so they can take the service charge every time. And so this girl told me, well, this is very offensive. She threw a paper at me, she was very rude, and I said, let me take care of this. I know just what to do. And so I wrote this satirical letter to her editors, again, in character, like with the glasses. Please, I'm begging you, give her the $7. You gotta understand, she showed up here and she threw this paper at this girl, and now the girl has a paper cut, Scarface, she could have been a beauty queen. This type of stuff, right? And so I send this to her editor, and then I asked the Fringe, do you mind if I post this in the beer tent? Because everyone writes the critiques of the performances and puts them up in the beer tent. It just happened to be me writing a critique of the theater critic's performance, but as a character, okay? So this is kind of subversive maybe. I don't think it's that subversive, but for them it was way too much. Because the next day the theater critic came, she saw the critique of her performance at the beer tent, she Chernobyl. She lost her mind, she stormed out of the beer tent. We were told a few hours later by the administration, whoa, well, because of what you guys did, now there's no more coverage for anyone in the newspaper, and this is the only newspaper in town in the English language, by the way. Montreal's a French city, so there's no more coverage for anyone because of you guys, and they're withdrawing the $15,000 sponsorship too. So thanks a lot, guys. And we're like, oh, that's really, that sucks, you know, but you know, what can you do type of thing. They said, what can we do? Oh, we're going to show you what we can do. We're going to kick you out of this Fringe, you know, and so that's what they did. They kicked us out. Now, of course, in the media, because the media had done this, it didn't say, oh, the media decided to kick out an act. It said, oh, well, the police were called and there were complaints and all this bullshit. And so, of course, for all these years since then, we've been trying to fight the good fight, and you know, it's funny. Even at that newspaper, there's some people on our side who do write articles about us sometimes. So, but the issue still isn't resolved. We still haven't been paid our ticket sales from that year. We still haven't been refunded the money we paid to use that. We've never received any type of apology. The newspapers never admitted to their mistakes. And so we're like, okay, we're just going to keep infringing then.
Did the World Fringe Congress, did they realize all of this happened in Montreal?
Yes, that was the funny thing. They knew all about this, and they specifically targeted me for invitation. They didn't invite any of the other infringement festivals, which was weird, because, you know, they didn't invite anyone from Buffalo, they didn't invite anyone from Hamilton, they didn't invite anyone from Brooklyn. So I told them, well, why didn't you invite these other people? And they're like, oh.
Well, because you guys been first? Was that what it was?
No, I think they were worried that it might be too much
Because then John
activism.
Willoughby would have gone and like it would have been over.
Yeah, so next year I want to bring tons of people if I can. Of course, next year they're going to get even more fringes. And another funny thing was they invited all of the Canadian fringes, and not a single Canadian fringe festival went.
Really?
Yeah, and so I sort of did some inquiries through my back channels as to why they didn't go. Apparently they didn't go because they feel that they own the Fringe trademark, so therefore the thing in Edinburgh wasn't legitimate. What? Yeah, and it's like, what? It's like, this is like where they started it, and you're saying it's not legitimate because you trademarked it, you know? And so they told them, their festivals, no, don't go there. This is not legitimate. We have the trademark. We should be hosting this type of event and not someone else. So wow, you know? Yes?
Do you have an idea of like the awareness of these issues to the general festival going public who's not, you know, an artist, you know, just goes, oh, I'm going to go to this festival, you know?
Yeah, the sad thing is your average person does not understand the types of mechanics behind festivals. In Montreal, we have tons of these corporate festivals that are free, jazz festival, just for laughs, whatever. And the government happily pays all this money for this because it's going to come back tenfold from the tourists paying for their hotel rooms, their meals, their tickets, you know, rental cars, whatever. And so this is this type of system that's becoming more and more common of just making a big corporate festival, and it's devoid of any type of artistry. It's just like, you know, I mean, these things are, you know, pretty crappy, a lot of them, you know. Yeah. It's not like anything original. They're just like, okay, let's find out what's going to work best. Like in Montreal, the History Museum, they said, oh, let's put an exhibit about the Beatles, because that'll be popular, even though it has nothing to do with history in Montreal. And it's this type of sort of, let's just corporatize the culture to try to get as much money out of it as we can, and tough for everything else. Yes?
It just surprises me that anyone would go to any of these like fringe things because they sound so like empty.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, like a one-person Star Wars show, a one-person whatever. It just doesn't sound.
People actually go to these.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I wouldn't want to see this type of show, but then again, I probably wouldn't watch the new Star Wars movie either. But, you know, they're just, I think it's a numbers game. They're like, everyone knows Star Wars, you know, and, well, I mean, this is going to sell because that's what they know.
So it is pretty well attended?
Yeah, and compared to the other shows, these are the things that make money at the Fringes. It's the one-man pop culture show. Star Wars, The Simpsons, you know, whatever the most popular thing is, just make a one-person show out of it, and you're good to go.
And what's really seems critical, especially in terms of like Occupy, is that, you know, it's taking back the real purpose of creative processes, you know, instead of just being fed this kind of mass-produced, mass-marketed mindset.
Yeah.
You know, that really numbs people.
Yeah, exactly. I
And they
mean,
don't think, and they just go, oh, isn't this nice, and they spend their money or whatever, but they're not learning or thinking.
yeah, it's like
or
the
expressing.
fast food of culture in a way, you know, and it's happening more and more, and this is why, you know, it's so nice to see this, something so real and so grassroots. I mean, in Montreal, I wouldn't be allowed to do this. They wouldn't even let me cross the goddamn border into the Fringe. Here, I can tell you what I want to say, you know, even in Edinburgh, they wouldn't let me have a workshop. Here, I can do anything I want, and so can you. That's amazing. It's not easy to do
In some ways,
that.
you know, since there is no Fringe festival here, nobody has like heard of it.
Exactly.
And so like, oh, infringement, it means, you know.
Yeah, that's the nice thing. There is no opposition to it here.
I think you'd run into a lot of problems though if you try to put a Fringe festival in Buffalo. I think so many people are comfortable with the Infringement Festival here. I mean, even the media though. I mean, look at like Colin. He writes everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who would write about a Fringe festival? I don't even know.
But it's worrisome. Think of it. There's a Niagara Bank Fringe right beside you now. Okay, what happens when there's 10 of them surrounding you? What happens when someone starts talking to your organizers and saying, hey, this person's getting paid up the road and you're not? That's not fair, is it? Hey, wouldn't you rather have all of these free perks like we're getting over here? So, you know, it's the type of thing, there's always a risk, you know? I mean, and it's not just here. This is a microcosm. It's happening across the globe. It's a question of, are we going to accept all of this corporate manipulation in every single part of our lives, you know, whether it's, you know, our education, our family, our culture, our language. It's embedded everywhere. Are we going to just accept this, or are we going to fight back? And that's, I think, the real issue, the crux of what has to happen if we're going to make a good future for people. Because if not, if we allow things to continue the way they're going, I don't think I'd want to be alive in 50 or 100 years, the way it's going to look if we allow that. So, you know, it's tough, but I think infringement is certainly one way to challenge it. Of course, there's many other ways too, things like the Occupy movement, the Red Squares, and all of the other movements that have yet to be imagined. So I guess I'll conclude it on that by just encouraging everyone, you know, don't accept the status quo, and please consider cultural resistance a strategy that you can use every day if you want. And that's why I believe infringing every day is a great concept. It's a great slogan. So thanks for everyone for coming out tonight, and thank you for Burning Books for hosting us as well. And I guess I'll just wrap it up there.